All right, well, I want to welcome everybody to this panel discussion for KITE on launching and starting your own business. I'm really pleased today to have two guests with me, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves in a minute. My name is JP Lake, short for John Paul, and I am one of the co-founders of KITE, the Current Initiative for Talent and Entrepreneurship, in partnership with KEDC and Richard Chapman, the CEO there. So we're pleased to have everybody again. And this session will be recorded, so you'll be able to share it with friends and colleagues and coworkers and hopefully other entrepreneurs here in Kern County and beyond. So today with me, I have two guests, Ebrahim Bhaiji, who is the co-founder of Castify, and Ebrahim is an entrepreneur from Bakersfield, and we're excited to have him, and he'll tell you more about what he and his great team are doing at Castify. And then I also have David Ponraj, who's the founder or co-founder of Startup Space, and many of you might recognize David because he's helping us launch Startup Space and our community hub on the KITE website. So guys, welcome. Good afternoon, and how's it going?
Going well.
Good. Thanks. Well, maybe let's start with Ebrahim. Could you tell us a little bit about Castify and how many employees you guys have, what you guys do, and maybe just your connections to Bakersfield?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure if it's coming from me, but I'll be sure to keep a lookout for that. But yeah, my name is Ebrahim. I'm the co-founder of Castify. We solve a very unique problem in the film industry where we're helping employees go digital for payroll. So essentially, we're a payroll startup. We specifically focus on actors, and we have a partnership with the largest union in the industry called SAG-AFTRA, where we take their digital voucher, we take their voucher and turn it digital. So in the past 6 months, we've been able to pay about 100,000 people as coming out of COVID, and our software is now being adopted at a studio level across the industry, which is really great. I come from Bakersfield. I went to BHS. For high school. I'm also a Cal State, not grad, but I did a couple of years there before transferring to San Diego State. But, my idea came to me, to answer your question, was specifically working in digital media. I was at the NFL in the Culver City office where I managed their Apple TV team. We worked on OTT platforms and redesigned the 4th generation Apple TV NFL app. My co-founder was a production accountant, also comes from digital media, and both of us had experienced the inefficiencies of the industry where, where a number of products and services are still stuck in a physical paper space. So if you onboard an employee, that paperwork then translates to the next department and then is carried over paper by paper. With by the end of it, you have this giant room of documents at wrap, and we both decided that enough was enough, and we looked for solutions. We couldn't find it, and then we started to think about what our solution could be. So we identified that gap, and we started to think about how we could fill it. If that answers your question.
Awesome. Yeah. Such a fascinating industry, and of course, being that you serve Hollywood, probably where most of your customers are, tell everyone where you're located nowadays.
Yeah, so currently located in Culver City in Los Angeles. We're outside of our house right now is Culver Studios, and Amazon Studios is being built right up. So I hear construction every day, but there's quite a bit of activity now coming back from COVID within the film industry as the entire industry looks to restart. Very exciting.
All right, and David, you're farther east, so where are you joining us from today, and how did the idea for Startup Space come to you?
Yeah. So first off, I'm very excited to be on this panel today. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the discussion today. I'm calling in from Tampa, Florida. So on the other end of the spectrum here in sunny Florida. And the idea came to me when I, in a previous business, tried to scale my business. I kept hitting a brick wall. And I told myself there has to be a better way for us to be able to find the tools that we need to get started. And so I went to corporate America, came back, retooled, got some social and intellectual capital, and got started on this mission to help institutions across the US, very much like yours, that are serving communities have better tools to be able to support the entrepreneurs. And this was pre-COVID. And then COVID hit, and I didn't have to explain to anyone why we needed digital tools anymore. That connection was made. Now it was more about how do these tools work. But essentially, organizations that support entrepreneurs tend to get siloed and focus on the great work they're doing. And there isn't somebody that's looking at what is out there for entrepreneurs. And so when entrepreneurs go to a particular organization, even if it's not the right solution for them, they end up kind of staying in that one place. And there isn't that connectivity tissue. And entrepreneurs need all kinds of help, right? You need help with accounting. You need help with finding some legal help. You need access to capital. And so what does that support network look like for small businesses? And that's the mission we're on in about 50 communities across the US today, very much like yours, with a singular mission. How do you simplify access for small businesses?
Yeah, really, really important topic. We're going to come back to that idea of some of the challenges that support organizations face and hear from both of you as entrepreneurs how you think groups like KITE and others in our community can do a better job of supporting founders like you. But before we do that, I think people would love to hear about some of your journey as founders. And either one of you can take this first, but how long did it take you to get to the point where you realized and felt like, okay, this really is a viable business. I think it's going to have a decent chance of making it. And what was it that made you feel that way? Was it revenue or your first prototype of the product or what?
Yeah, I can take that. One of the first things as entrepreneurs, as an entrepreneur, from my perspective, the first thing we built was an MVP, was the minimum viable product. And that essentially was the first goal. What was the lowest cost, highest fidelity item that we could build that would validate the problem that we wanted to solve? And one of the ways that we did that is we built a Squarespace landing page, and it cost us $16 a month. And it took me about 4 hours. I came up with a name on GoDaddy, and I didn't think twice around what the name was. I knew we would change it. Built a Squarespace landing page, and then we went to a place called Central Casting. I think you guys may be familiar with the name, but essentially, 200 to 300 people line up outside of their doors on Tuesdays and Thursdays to try to get signed up as an actor and work on TV shows. So I bought some donut holes, and we went out there and we just started talking to people, and we said, hey, if there was a better way for you to find jobs and get paid, would you sign up for that? What are some of the problems that you face? What are some of the issues that you have? And we found a lot of them were new to LA. They came from all over the world, small towns in America. They were hopping from place to place. So getting payment from these places was hard because they were moving locations. And not having, everyone had iPhones. This was like 27. Sorry, this is 2015. So everyone had a digital, computer in their pocket, and these large organizations were still relying heavily on a very outdated process. So that minimum viable product was really the validation point. We we handed out 100 business cards, and the metric was, how many people signed up to our website and gave us their information, and we had 79 people sign up and say,
wow,
we're interested, and that was the first step of validation that we're on the right track there.
What a cool story. I mean, and who wouldn't be willing to talk to someone for some donuts and maybe coffee or something. So very low cost. I'm curious, David, did you employ any kind of guerrilla tactics like this to just kind of go put an idea out there before you started Startup Space?
Yeah, so we did something very similar. It wasn't $16, it was a little bit more than that. But what I did was I quit my job on June 1st, and I told myself within 30 days of quitting my job, we're going to put a very simple mobile app with one feature in the App Store. So we kind of said minimum viable product. We gave ourselves 30 days and $3,000. We said 30 days, $3,000. We need to get a mobile app in the App Store because our MVP was to test this idea of using technology to break down the barriers and connect entrepreneurs to resources. So the MVP needed that technology solution. The guerrilla tactic I used was, so working in corporate America, I led innovation for Nielsen. So I had accumulated about 650,000 airline miles from my days in corporate America. So I actually booked about 5 months worth of travel in the first month. And I simply applied to, so there is this organization through Kaufman called 1 Million Cups. I applied to like 31 million cups, no agenda, nothing. I had like this slide deck that had 3 slides. And very much like Ebrahim, I went to Google, typed in, there is a website where you can type, what is it that you do? And it'll suggest a name for you. And I picked that name as the name of the company. I took that name, went to another website, you put the name of your company and it'll suggest a logo for you. I put the name, it suggested a logo, made sure I got the EPS file and owned the copyrights to that logo, and then went and applied trademark. So didn't hire anybody for anything. Literally got the trademark on the name and the logo, and went on this tour of like 15 different cities. And I simply told them my idea. And of course, I had this mobile app. I said, you should download this app and I have this idea. What I found out is that people would come to me in every one of these events and say, hey, what you're trying to do is what we are trying to do. So they would say, you're trying to connect people, but that's our mission, because at 1 million cups, there are all these connectors. So I started thinking, after like 10 people told me that, I thought, you know what, let me just white label this and tell them that they can do it themselves. So so I started this journey in July, started traveling around the country. October 17th, I had made it to Denver. In Denver, I finally said, you know what, the next person who tells me that this is what I'm supposed to do, I'll say, this is available for you, you can white label it. And we signed a contract for $1,200 that day for a 1-year license with simply one feature. It was a chat feature. You could chat with anybody locally and find somebody who can help you.
Wow.
And so since then, I've spoken at 51 million cups around the country. Even through COVID, I speak at it, and I get to talk to wonderful communities. We have about 20 clients that came directly from just speaking at those events.
Very cool.
Wow. Yeah. I love the common thread in both of your stories, in that I heard, you started with the minimum viable product, or the MVP, and you quickly got that into the hands, or got feedback from as many potential customers as you could. And I bet that experience probably was so valuable to both of you in thinking about, how you could validate this idea and whether it made sense to take the risk of moving forward. And so, speaking of risk, what for you guys personally or in the business, what was the biggest risk once you made the leap and you decided to make this MVP? What was the next big challenge or hurdle that you had to overcome?
Well, the biggest risk is the opportunity cost, right? So it's not the amazing salary with full benefits, right? So you miss out on that, especially early on. So you have to essentially figure out, how are you going to survive, right? How do you pay your bills? So there's always some unique ways to do some unique solutions. But one of the things that I did personally was I found a location where I could Airbnb part of the house that I lived in, and that actually paid 90% of the rent. So I realized that I could live almost rent free, and then the need for a salary wasn't so high. So I realized, okay, I have some savings. My rent is mostly covered. I think we're in a good position to possibly jump into this. So we kind of built steps to this launch pad to try to de-risk the downside of completely falling apart. And other risks that we faced were competitors, timing, right? There's resources, myself and my co-founder, so Ram, our CEO, she's a front-end developer, designer, and the production accountant, and I managed operations, and I did business development, and then I also helped on the product management side. So between the two of us, we covered, I would say, maybe 7 different roles personally, as we built out the MVP essentially.
Ebrahim, I'm curious, after hearing that David gave himself a pretty specific goal of 30 days and $3,000, did you have any sort of similar kind of budget or way that you tried to kind of have a plan to, as you said, de-risk it? It sounds like the Airbnb thing was part of that, but was there kind of a number that you knew, all right, I can afford to spend this much and this amount of time before I would have to, maybe go back if it doesn't work out and go back to a regular job?
We actually kept a full-time job early on. Okay. So we decided to work in the evenings. So when we started the corporation, we kept our full-time jobs for as long as possible, until we felt there was traction. We got access to an incubator, had some early mentors, and then we got our first client. And our first client was a small TV show that was shooting in East LA, and they needed 100 people, and they wanted to hire 100 people from us. And we had just 30 names in our database at that time. So we then had to go through the process of sourcing available options for them, and we used a number of online digital tools, gave them availability to make those selections using, I think it was Google Forms and Google Sheets at the time, and they made those selections and hired those people, and then we manually did the payroll through Excel on the back end at early days. So this is before we had all the pieces connected. So that was the first trigger that we were onto something, and then business started to pick up after that. And we decided at some point that we needed to go full time and made that decision.
And David, I'm curious. And both of you really, you guys have products that are, mostly software based. And you started with something really simple. Whether you're kind of faking it until you make it, doing it with Excel in the background, or you just had the chat feature for your initial version. David, at some point, David, did you have to raise some money to help build out the product or scale the company? And if so, tell us about that first experience of going out to raise money from investors.
Yeah, so we did the complete traditional route. In fact, we kind of bill ourselves or kind of brand ourselves as the platform for everyday entrepreneurs. And I actually did it the way I would encourage 90% of Americans to do it, because the percentage that actually end up raising money is going to be very small. But for the simple fact that if I'm going to give you money, I'm going to move into your house, because the way I got my money was by making money. And I'm not going to lose my money on any one idea if I don't have a sure way I'm going to get my money back. Right. So the pool of people that invest is going to be really small, because they want to make sure that they can get their money back. For 90% of us, it's a very traditional route. I actually took down my 401k. I quit my job, took down my 401k, but de-risked the whole thing. My wife was working. We told ourselves, and I tell entrepreneurs all the time, the goal of entrepreneurship is to make money and become rich. The goal of entrepreneurship is to not become poor. So you want to make sure that all of your decisions are based on understanding what is to gain, what is to lose, and creating limits and boundaries and accountability with your financials, so that in the process of trying to become rich, you don't become poorer. Because there are lots of people, saying, I've got an idea, I'm going to make the idea work, I'm going to sell my house, I'm going to go live on the street. And then you hear one or two people making it through there, and they think that that's the pathway, when it's not. For most of the people, entrepreneurship is about wealth creation. So what we did, we created clear milestones. I took out about, I broke up my 401k into two chunks. I had one $25,000 and one $35,000. So I had $70,000 I took out. And I said, the first $25,000 is to go get my first client. So $3,000 was to build the MVP, and the rest of it was travel, marketing, and hiring somebody to help me and get $25,000 to get a client. If I didn't get my first client, I was going to go back and work for somebody else. So I got my first client, and I said, okay, we're going to invest. The remaining $35,000 is to now actually full on create a marketing plan, get that first customer to tell us why they bought, and find more customers of that sort. And so in 2 years, we've gone from zero to profitability by using that model, being really smart about our decisions, understanding the risk factors with investing money of your own money, and how do you make more of it. And at every step, listening to customers, telling us what they don't like, fixing it, and taking what they like and putting into a marketing plan, and then going and telling everybody else what one plus customer likes. And so that's kind of how we've grown. There is a whole investment path that I can talk about, but this business was started 100% bootstrapped, and to this day is bootstrapped, because 90% of Americans will not qualify for an investment, right? We have friends and family money, maybe some SBA loans, maybe some collateral in your house, etc. And you got to make really smart financial decisions at every step, creating some kind of an accountability partner, knowing that, like Ebrahim said, more than your great idea, timing is a much bigger factor than the great idea that you have and the great capabilities you have. Competition, there could be, some downturn like COVID that could change your plans, etc. So it's really about being smart.
I think that's well said. Ebrahim, you mentioned that you may have participated in an incubator, I think, and David didn't say this word, but he said, in essence, it sounded like, David, you had milestones that you said, okay, $25,000 to get to this next milestone, or which is a goal. And if you hit that goal, that then unlocked kind of the next amount of funding. Yep. Ebrahim, I'm wondering if you went through an incubator, was that one of the concepts that they worked with you guys on too? This idea of having milestones and a plan and how to get there in each phase?
Yeah, absolutely. There was the MVP, which was that first milestone, and then your first client, which, if you build something, the base level of entrepreneurship is if you build something and someone pays you for it, whether it's a Chrome extension like Honey that got acquired for $4 billion, those, if someone pays you for it, that is really the validation that you needed. So that was the first milestone, and we were in a 3-month incubator where we then had to then go up the chain, say, okay, we worked with our first client. How do we get to a network? How do we get to a studio? How do we get to a production company that's producing 15 projects? So then, we kind of started to work our way up from there. Luckily, we had some contacts that we had built from just being in the industry that helped us get there. We essentially started to build and then scale, but scale up the clients essentially. But it's not as straightforward as that. It's really a rocky path throughout the whole way. So
yeah, how would you guys I guess prioritize or think about the importance of the idea itself, for the product, versus having the right team or having the right timing?
Yeah, Dave, you want to take it?
Sure. So in my first business, I thought an entrepreneur meant you do everything yourself. So I built my own website. I did my own marketing plan. Huge no. Like, there's an opportunity cost for your time, right? And so what time you don't spend building a website, you can actually go and try to find a customer. And it is not that there is simply downtime, right? Or even time that's downtime, it's your family time because you need to rejuvenate. So got really smart with my second business. And there are two things that are so critical to the success of scaling a business. Now, if you're like a micro business, a one-man show, it's not as relevant. But if you're trying to scale your business, just as important are your customers is your team, because your team creates scale, and your team allows you to kind of have a product offering that actually can be delivered, right? Because the first customer can be serendipity, but like your 10th customer, you got to actually show that your product works, right? And that's where the team comes in. And the team also gives you credibility. So I've been extremely blessed to have a team that has the same vision and focus and drive, and understand the value that we're creating in the marketplace. For me, that's just as or even more important than getting my next client, is the finding that next talent that kind of wants to work with you and is bought into your vision. And I spend, as the CEO, I look at like there are 2 or 3 things I have to do. One of those critical things is hiring people, because I have to invest in getting the right value and cultural fit. That is my job. So I focus a lot on networking, looking at people in the industry, spending time understanding people that are looking to move jobs, etc. And that's, I look at it as an investment that I make to make sure that I have a great team to work with. But I'll stop and let Ebrahim jump in.
So for you, I'm hearing team is absolutely number one. And Ebrahim, where are you? What would be your number one out of those? Idea, the timing, or the team?
It's going to be the team too. It is absolutely and I would be more specific, the founding team, right? If you're an entrepreneur doing it completely on yourself, then that's hats off to you. But if you're putting together a company and you're trying to build $100 billion business, you're going to need to have a strong founding team, and you're going to find people that complement you. One, on the cultural fit that David said, but more that a set of skills that you don't have. So my co-founder was a technical co-founder. So she was able to code, understand deep accounting principles, and I was the yang to that, and filled the rest of the void there. And that was the original founding team. And that's you. If you have the team, and if you look at you're part of a venture group, but a lot of these large investors, what they're mostly looking at first is, what is the team? The idea is important, but who's going to be the people that are going to be building this, and do they have what it takes to take this to $100 million or take this to $1 billion, right?
Yeah. I think that's right. I think investors are ultimately betting on the team and the founders. But circling back then maybe to the idea versus timing, I didn't hear either one of you mention that patents were really important, or that you were worried about getting people to sign non-disclosure agreements. If I heard you guys right, you kind of just put your idea out there and you figured if anyone's going to do that, it's going to be me and my co-founder. You have any thoughts on that? Should people just share their ideas, or do they need to protect it with?
Yes.
Yes.
You do not need to do any of that stuff at first. Don't like, David went so far to even like trademark his logo. I think I just trademarked our logo I think a month ago, and we've been in business for like 5 years. So
Wow.
it's a lot of that stuff, no one's going to be able to actually, so we were in the incubator. We were pitching investors as the exit of the incubator, and we had this advisor investor come to us and put us in a room, and he said, hey, look, if you don't bring me on and give us 50% of your company, I'm going to go and build this myself. This is a fantastic idea. And that's, these are your options. We walked away from that, and we thought, man, we should have had him sign an NDA. What were we thinking? This was a really terrible scenario. But he went and tried, but he wasn't able to do it. It's really hard for someone to have the same vision, to have the same thought as you, and to execute it is going to be completely different. And most people have a very hard time doing that.
Yeah. David, I see you nodding. In agreement?
100%. Yeah, I think that the trademark piece I did because our space was very, very crowded. Like, there were too many people that all did and said the same thing. And so I didn't want any encroachment, but I'm fully with Ebrahim. Like, even that was probably overreach. We didn't even have to do that. We didn't do anything. In fact, in your idea state, you should tell your idea to everybody, because you might find a co-founder, you might find somebody who wants to work with you. The downside is so little and the upside is so big, nobody's going to copy your idea. And here's the thing, if they're going to copy your idea, they're going to copy your idea either ways. And they're not going to come and tell you, you'll find out 6 months later, right? For me, I've lived my life saying execution is the best strategy. Like, the people that execute get to keep the money. Like, all kinds of strategies can be laid out, but you can't predict the future. So you got to be there to execute every single day. And so I am fully with Ebrahim. Like, we didn't do any of those steps. We told everybody our ideas. However, I will say, as we've grown, we've put things in place, right? Like, we didn't have an HR. Today, we have somebody on the team doing some of the HR work because we have like 15 people. We know when we get to 30, we will need an HR person just because there's so much work to be done. We used to create our own contracts by looking at Google. Well, now we actually do have to work with a lawyer to get the contracts because these contracts are $250,000. There is a downside to not doing good work, right? So you need to be smart about at what stage what works needs to be done. You want to stay away from the fallacies, which is getting somebody to sign an NDA. It's of no use. If you're small and you're trying to get somebody to sign an NDA, you don't have the money to go file a lawsuit if they copy your idea, right? And they will copy your ideas either way. So, and there's not very much protection in that space for you because you have to prove that you had this original idea that they actually took a blueprint off and did. So yeah, at every stage, your challenges will change. But when you're small, timing is number one. So speed is of the essence. The faster you go, the less resources you're going to consume, your own personal resources, which is the opportunity cost, plus the resources in the ecosystem that you need to build. So when you're small, as fast as you can, and then when you start getting bigger, you got to start de-risking some of the things that can kind of end up being pitfalls if you're not careful.
Yeah,
I like the way you, I like the way you framed the downside versus the upside. Right? There's very little downside when your company's worth nothing and it's just an idea, and the upside is you find your co-founder or your first customer or a strategic partner. It's an interesting way to think about it. So we've got a few more minutes here. And I want to transition a little bit to sort of back to something that David mentioned earlier, and that was, organizations that help support founders like yourselves. And both of you have started your companies, obviously not in Bakersfield. You both have connections now to Bakersfield. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the differences you see in the resources that are available in Bakersfield or Kern County versus resources that you've seen in your own community, or in David, in your case, and in other communities that you're working with? And what do you see, positives and negatives maybe relative to what you see in Bakersfield?
Yeah, I can take that first one. I think because of the proximity to larger cities, like Bakersfield is positioned between the Bay Area and Los Angeles, there can be somewhat of a talent drain, but I've started to see a lot of my close friends move back during COVID, which is actually a really, they've realized they can actually, live at home or buy a house in Bakersfield, and they've started to work remotely. But I think from a city perspective, the city of Bakersfield has grown tremendously in the past 10 years, and the development of the highway, the 58, going almost all the way to the 5. I think there's a lot of potential growth that's expected to happen there. And I've seen a lot of amazing businesses not only get founded, but started. So the city, along with, I think there was a co-working space that was doing pretty well pre-COVID there that had started to attract a number of entrepreneurs. So I think where you start your company now doesn't matter, because Google is your best friend, and any thought or anything you have can be Googled. You can find great employees down the street or internationally. There's actually a huge benefit now than there used to be, where, you know, I had to be in Los Angeles. I had to show up to the studios and do my pitches, where now I can be fully remote. And we're probably going to stay that way for at least another year or so. So from a positioning standpoint, founders in Bakersfield have a really unique opportunity now to build businesses where you're not having to fly across the country anymore to do a pitch. You can just set up a Zoom call and you can make an impact from the seat of your room.
Was the incubator program helpful to you and your founder?
It was helpful. It was helpful. I think the most helpful things was just reading. I would suggest, you know, everyone read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. It was Eric Ries or Peter Thiel. I'm not sure if it's which one it is, but you know, there's a lot of books for building startups and building and like having a specific lens on for finding problems in society. And from 0 to 1, someone Tabari posted it, 0 to 1, Peter Thiel, that's the one. Perfect. Yeah, it's a great book, and it helps lay the foundation for how you build a company from 0 to 1, or even if you're not going from 0 to 1, having the ideas in place to start that is really critical. So I would say the incubator helped, but not so much.
Okay. And David, you didn't go through an incubator, but you've probably seen and worked with a lot of them all across the country. What are some of the good things you see in other communities that maybe we should be thinking about here, or just again, where you see us as a community in terms of supporting entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I'll first kind of second what Ebrahim just said, that your best friend as an entrepreneur is the insatiable curiosity to learn. I am not kidding. I read about a book a week, and I've been doing this for the last 3 years. I didn't do it as much when I was in corporate America, because I figured whatever I needed to know, they'll tell me. And if they didn't tell me, I didn't need to know. Now I am personally responsible to know everything that I should know. And so what I don't know is what's going to hurt me. So at any given point in time, I am reading a book and making sure that I'm actually constantly retooling. A great way to know what to read is to kind of understand what stage you're in and what gaps you have in knowledge, and finding a great author and being able to, what I do is I just download the thing on my audiobooks. And when I'm driving, I'm listening to even like 20 minutes, 10 minutes here and there. In fact, the book I'm reading right now is called E-Myth. So we're at a point in our organizational journey where we have grown to a point where we need processes to be able to scale. And so this book called E-Myth, it talks about the franchise model and the ability to retool and to have these processes. So first part, absolutely, you got to constantly keep learning. On what makes your community better is, in this kind of connected world, you have all the tools you can find on Google. But if you can get your community to sync up, where no matter who shows up to which organization in your community, that you all sing from the same hymn book, that will make a big difference. That if you know that whether they show up to SCORE or to SBDC or the local community center or the library, that you all kind of have the same support network built, so that when somebody walks through your doors, you can say, I might not do this, but I know exactly who's doing this, and I know what program that will work for you. I think that makes a big difference, because even in this connected world, we want to talk to people. If I had the choice of learning something on Google on a video call, or going and having a coffee with an entrepreneur or somebody who can help me, I'd prefer the coffee, because of human beings, we love interactions. So if your community, when those interactions happen, if you can all have that coordinated, what we call many front doors, where all the front doors all are the same door into the ecosystem, I think you create like this really rich environment. Versus in a traditional model, everybody's got their silo and they're really good at it, but don't ask them something they're not good at, because you're going to be dropped between the net. So that would be my suggestion. Great communities that while we work in, they're very connected. Communities we see where things start falling apart, very fragmented. Everybody feels like it's a zero-sum game. If I win, they lose. So I got to make sure I get the grant dollars so that they don't get the grant dollars. They don't have this unified vision that we can all kind of, rising tide lifts all boats. They don't have that mentality.
That's a really interesting observation, and I'm glad you came back to that comment about silos and what you meant by that. A couple of things stand there. So you're the bingo winner. You said podcast, and so I'll take this opportunity to plug the KITE podcast. I put it in the chat there. We've got 2 episodes up, folks. If you haven't checked them out, please do so. And we're doing one every month. So the next 2 have already been recorded, and the next one comes out April 15th, I believe. So please check out the KITE podcast. I want to land on a final question for you guys, and you just touched on it, David, about the importance of people and relationships, and even that idea of a rising tide lifts all boats. So this question goes to you, and then we'll close it with Ebrahim. Was there one person in this journey so far for you, David, who really came alongside you and supported? And I'm not talking about maybe an employee or a founder, but was there someone else in your life who really helped encourage you through this entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, it was my wife. I had my wife hold me accountable. At the end of the day, when the lights are off, right, you're going to have your moment of truth. Is this working or is this not working? And so I kept my wife away from the business, or your spouse in this case, right? You keep your spouse away from the business so that they can be this impartial judge of whether it's working or not. And I gave her the milestones. So when the time came for the milestones, she would have an honest conversation with me. Like, are we there? If we're not there, we have agreed to what we need to do next. And so the whole 3 years, she's been by my side, holding me accountable to the things that we want to do, right? We want to create wealth for ourselves. So we got to be able to execute on the things that we want and be truthful about what doesn't work. I think everybody needs that accountability partner. Even if you don't have a co-founder or you don't have somebody that's a mentor, you need to have somebody who can hold you accountable and just tell you the truth. Because as an entrepreneur, we're extremely delusional, right? Like, we're extremely positive. I tell my wife, if I'm upset about anything in life, let me go to bed. When I wake up, I don't even know why I was upset. Like, that's what allows you to survive, right? It's a survival instinct of an entrepreneur. You're always positive. You always think that it's that next call that's going to give you the sale, right? So you got to have accountability partners. Your co-founders can be great accountability partners, but if not, you got to find somebody that can hold you accountable, because without that support network, you're going to fail, and you truly need that to be successful.
Ebrahim, same question for you.
One person is kind of hard for me. My first business was located in Bakersfield in 2012. It was a offshoot of one of my parents' businesses. It's called KB Prints. I would say mentors are probably the biggest. A select mentor for each stage that you're at is probably the most influential person that could probably affect your outcome of the business. One of my first mentors in Bakersfield was Tim Terrio. Tim was a fantastic coach and advisor for me. Not only did he open doors, but we would meet for coffee, and he would help me understand, how viable this was and how I should be looking at this. And he introduced, resources like books and groups of people to help me think things better. And, in each stage of my life, I have a few select people like that are helping me and making sure that I always have a clear lens on, and I'm not drinking some Kool-Aid that's going to allow me to veer off course too far. Right. So I think David has his wife, but I have an advisor essentially that's like always kind of acting as a coach for me.
All right, and just curious, so Ebrahim, this was your second startup, it sounds like. David, is Startup Space your first entrepreneurial venture?
My first crashed and burnt. So okay. This came from the ashes of the first one. I tried for 4 years and failed miserably. So this is my second venture, which was lessons from my first.
And so given that you guys both took the plunge a second time, am I being presumptuous in saying that you feel it's been worth it and that you would do it all over again?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's painful. It's it's a lonely journey at times, right? It has a lot of setbacks, a lot of, they say it's a roller coaster because sometimes you're doing really well and sometimes you're not doing too well. And all of it's true. All of that's true, but it's absolutely worth it. You'll grow a lot as a person. And you'll really have to be true to yourself to actually to make it. And I think that's probably the best way. It was definitely worth it. On my side, I would do it again in a heartbeat.
I will say that I'm already itching to start a third venture so that I can not make the mistakes I made in the second one. That's all I can think of is like, okay, if I did it again, I wouldn't do this, this, and this. And you could not know till you do it and fail at it. So.
Yep. Well, there's something to be said for serial entrepreneurs, and they're a great thing in the world from my perspective. So I want to thank you both for joining us on this panel discussion today, and really enjoyed getting to hear more about what you guys do, how you do it, what your journey's been. And so from all of our panelists, attendees here, thank you. And before everyone drops off, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle Patterson, our director at Seed Corps Foundation and KITE, and she's got a few updates for us. And Richard, I don't know if you need to make Danielle a host real quick so that she can do that. I might need to buy us some time. I do see that we had a question come in, so maybe while we're making Danielle a host, let's go to the question. So the question is, do you recommend trying out the idea or waiting until you have all the pieces together? And is there a safe place to test your idea? So I guess this would be referring to your minimum viable product or your service. Whoever wants to jump in on that one.
Yeah, it would be a deck, Google Slides, PowerPoint. Put your idea onto paper, and there's a certain format for every deck. It's state your problem and then the solution. And then what is the market? How big is this market? As I've learned through a couple businesses, understanding the market and how big this market can get is really important because it shows you how big your business can get. And if you look up Heidi, startup or business decks, you'll see that certain format. But start there and put together just the early ideas, and then if you think you have a couple early customers, I would suggest showing it to them and just getting their thoughts. And without having to do anything, you can essentially learn more about the problem that you're solving.
Awesome, David. Anything to add to that, or did Ebrahim nail it?
He nailed it.
All right. Well, Danielle, maybe you could bring us home here. And again, Ebrahim and David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Hi. Thank you, guys. It was a really wonderful conversation. I loved David and Ebrahim, how you shared don't do everything alone, and how you followed that up, Ebrahim, with you need someone who has a set of skills different than your own. And I think being a part of KITE, that's really a strong focus for us, is connecting entrepreneurs with resources so they don't have to do everything alone. So thank you guys for joining the conversation. It was wonderful. I do want to follow up with just a few announcements, that activities and events that we have coming up over the next few months. Our guidance committee is reconvening and has reestablished a meeting time. We have our first meeting on March 25th at 1 p.m. That's going to be virtually. I am going to put emails in the chat box. If you're interested in joining the guidance committee and kind of being a large participant in the direction of the Startup Space platform, please email us so we can get you plugged in. Sue Watson will also be hosting a business planning workshop on June 9th from 2:30 to 3:45. We would love for you to join us on that. It's currently going to be in a virtual format, but that may change. Then we're going to start talking about the community launch of the Startup Space platform, which we are so excited about. We have a tentative date of May 1st, or the first week of May, and we're looking for everyone to be a component of that. The guidance committee is going to be a large piece of developing the direction of that community launch. And so if you're interested in really getting plugged in, please email us. We could use your participation and input. We also have begun starting the process of accepting mentorship and mentee applications. And that was something that David and Ebrahim both mentioned, was that mentorship and that coaching component was so important. And so we want to be a resource for that in our community. And so if you're interested in getting connected with a mentor, or if you're looking at providing your services of being a mentor, please email us at info@gokite.org, and JP just put it in the chat box. And then JP, you touched on the podcast. The podcast we do have, it's on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and iTunes. You also can locate it on the Startup Space platform, and you can get it directly from gokite.org. Talking a lot about the platform and that connectivity and being so viable for entrepreneurs within our county, we really encourage you to log on. Log on to Startup Space. You can get on directly through Join Our Community on gokite.org. Once you get in there, create your profile. That's going to create a lot of the connectivity between resource providers, community leaders, but also entrepreneurs. Is once you set your profile and you establish your persona, you can start to begin to build the relationships that are, you can start to begin to build the relationships that are going to be so important for the success and the direction of your business. We also ask that you get on and introduce yourself and connect now. I don't know if David, if that was your original MVP when you started the business. Connect now. Yep. So connect now is a way for you to communicate and really begin to bridge that gap within the community. And so we encourage, go on, introduce yourself. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, please introduce yourself and discuss some information and ideas, but also you can use to share. One of the features that I really like about Connect Now is you can use it as a way to share articles that have been important or helpful to you. Also, the resource compass and events. If you haven't, if you're a service provider and you have yet to claim your resource, that can be done through the resource compass, and you can also suggest events. So we're still looking for events within the community. We have a couple of collated calendars, but we're always looking for more. We really do want to be the place, as David said, where everything is in one spot. We make it as easy as possible for an entrepreneur. So please go on and check that out. And you have input, and you can also email that at info@gokite.org. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to our attendees for joining us. It was wonderful to hear the conversation. Thank you, JP, and thank you for all the attendees that came and joined us this afternoon.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.